actually generally really like the era's stuff. When I was a kid, it was a big like gateway for me in terms of like seeing the different things. I think I'm hotter on the Gold and Silver Age stuff, and then the Bronze and Future stuff is like less of my jam, even though I think that they are all like doing a fine job of being like retro Superman stuff. And then the Dominus arc, like I could just fall asleep reading.
Yeah, I'm like, I like the Golden Age. I think the Bronze Age was interesting just because of Stuart Immonen. Silver Age, I could take or leave. The Future one, I really just could care less about. But I have a lot of thoughts about it, which I'm, again, trying to be positive about.
We do try to be positive, but, you know, anything you want to say, like, this is a safe space for everyone.
Right.
And welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jmike Folson.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back. Today's episode is very much a welcome back kind of thing, because today we are talking about the arc that DC did after the Electric Blue era of Superman to say, hey, guys, Superman's back. Regular Superman's back. Coca-Cola Classic is back. And they really wanted to rub everyone's nose and like, yeah, no, we're going like hardcore classic Superman by having every book be just as classic Superman as possible. Like whatever you call classic Superman was out there in the books that were running, all four of them at the time. Because, God, there used to be 4 running Superman books simultaneously. Yeah. And to have a conversation about the Dominus Effect, we are joined from the Truth, Justice, and Hope podcast by Grant Richter.
Truth and Justice, guys, I am thrilled to be here.
Grant, it's so great to have you on. We love having other Superman podcasters on, and you've got a really positive one. What is your show, and where can people find you?
Truth, Justice, and Hope is a show that breaks down issue by issue the Superman comics that began with Convergence right before Rebirth, going through Rebirth. I'm about to start on the Bendis era right now, and then also has a segment called My Thoughts from the Fortress of Solitude, where I talk about politics and real life and ethics and morality and all that good stuff. And some people really like that part, and some people really don't. like Kay said, we'll talk about it more later.
I really enjoy that aspect of the show. There is a little bit of being a Superman fan as looking what morality through the lens of a Superman fan is. I think that that's really great that you engage with what the world is like and what it means to be a person who has this innate belief that this kind of positive role model is a good thing. And so what does that say about the rest of the world? Yeah. So I think everyone should check out your podcast. It's a lot of fun to listen to and a very different beat than ours. Like we're both Superman shows, but you're very much covering like specific issues on the regular, and people aren't surprised at what the next episode is each time. Whereas like we kind of just like are talking about whatever we feel like talking about on any given point. Yeah. That just kind of is how it goes.
Yeah, I have a very linear thought process. So once I start something, I've got to go from point A to point Z. And Rebirth, even though I got into it just as Rebirth was more or less ending, it's what made me fall in love with Superman about 3.5 years ago. And I figure it's far enough back that it's not really a major spoiler for anybody that's interested in it. So it just felt like the right thing to do.
When we started our show, which was a little bit over 4 years ago, so for us, like it was a scenario of like, well, we know that we're not going to be able to stay on top enough of like a particular comic run. So for us, it was like, oh yeah, we'll do more scattershot and like more of like a book club kind of format for that. But it's great that like we can have like these different types of shows and have them all be like kind of their own niche. So I think it's awesome that we are here together now talking about an arc that I know you've looked at some of these issues before, but like now we're actually having a chance to like talk about this weird era of Superman. So 1998, man. So this, like I alluded to, is the arc that came right after the Electric Blue era of Superman ended. And the way they ended it was they didn't fucking tell us how it ended. They just were like, nah, and he's back to normal. He disappeared in an explosion and is back. Is back normal, guys. Full disclosure, this arc is considered to include Superman Forever, which was the special that they put out at the end of, I think it was the Millennium Giants event is why he fused.
Yeah, right after Millennium Giant. Yeah.
Which was, talk about a nothing of an event, but
like, every year I start over with like almost the death of Superman and I go all the way through the 90s. So for 3 years, I've read the 90s in a row. I have yet to read Millennium Giants because every time I get to it, I'm like, and next.
Right. And like, I could never understand like why they couldn't just goddamn wait 2 years to like just hold it for the actual millennium and do that story. They're like, oh, they came too early. So it's just another goddamn monster thing. Like it's just another event, right. Which, you know, I think this is the early era of all of us just being like, oh, so it's just another event.
Right. And what's more than that is because Electric Superman makes a brief appearance in Y2K, it would have been so much better if they just held on, kept doing Electric Blue Superman up until, you know, January of 2000, and then used the Y2K virus to techno-magically transform Superman back into his traditional self.
Yeah, like that would be, narratively speaking, a lot of fun. Now, I think that at the time, the fan outcry was bad enough that they were like, no, we got to go back. I think that this arc specifically is DC being like, fine, you don't like Electric Blue Superman. Here, we're going to give you the most classic goddamn Superman we can.
3 classic Superman, kind of.
I mean, honestly, 4, because like the future timeline one is also like based on an imaginary story one. And his story is so Silver Agey, you know? That like it makes enough sense in the group. It does feel weird because like they're not explicit. I think it'd be more explicit if it was like Superman Red and Blue or you know, like one of the like the famous imaginary stories instead, or Mr. and Mrs. Superman, like the Earth 2 setting Superman stuff.
See, I had no idea about that. I had all kinds of crazy theories about why they came up with this particular story. I did not know that because my knowledge of the Silver and Bronze Age Superman is weak, which is something I'm working on correcting. But if we break down each of the 4 eras into detail, I will kind of explain all that when we get to it.
Yeah, we'll talk about each of the eras because that is what the big reason for reading this arc is. The Eras tour. Like this for me, when it came out, was a great way for, I guess, 14-year-old, 13-year-old me to like be like, oh, right. Yeah. Silver Age stuff. Like, because I'd read some random issues, but like prior to the internet being like this ubiquitous source of access to everything, you couldn't just casually like grab a Silver Age comic and like read it. The polyester years, like moniker for it, or the plaid years or whatever the term for.
Yeah, I think they called it the polyester era, which is awesome.
Like all these different eras for the comics. Like if you don't know about them, the 90s was when trade paperbacks were started to become a big thing. And so they had like some cool collections that would include some random issues that were like, these are really good issues of those eras, like the Greatest Superman Stories Ever Told volume that we've like talked a lot about on the show. Cool. Like here's like what a random issue from like 1954 looks like. But it didn't give you like this overall vibe for it. You just saw like a few highlights. So this was like kind of fun to see like what the writers and artists were thinking when they were thinking of retro references, which was very big in the late 90s. Like this is around the same time of the Alan Moore Supreme run, which was very big on doing like retro Superman stuff. They overlapped each other. It started, I think, 96 and then ran to like 99. So people are talking about retro stuff. We're seeing the birth of like Astro City around the same time. Books that like really loved the history of comics, like comics about comics, were back in vogue after, if you think about like the Bronze Age with like all the Roy Thomas stuff, like Infinity Inc. and stuff like that. Like people were like go through waves of being like more into retro material or less into retro material. And this was like a big like font of time where people were like, yeah, I want to draw comics that like reference like the books that I grew up on kind of stuff.
Right.
Which I guess is about right for like the 30-year cycle that people talk about. Like this is 98. So it's like 30 years from like 68. So like coming out of the Silver Age, as it were.
Right. And, you know, like you mentioned, Busiek, this is around the time that Marvel did Heroes Return. They're going from all this edgy, gimmicky stuff from the early to mid-90s. They're bringing in a writer who has a lot of affection for Bronze and Silver Age Avenger stories and doing all that. And so I really do feel like DC was kind of following the same trend. Yeah. Going into this.
And that scenario was Kurt Busiek, who also did Marvels, which is like talk about like a level up there to like a specific era of superhero stuff.
Right.
So we're going to talk about each of these eras. We're going to then talk about the actual Dominus stuff that happens afterwards. So we're clear about what we're talking about. Superman Forever, we can just say it kind of like the way the issue, it's the Adventures of Superman, was it Adventures of Superman 500 in the Death and Return arc where like Jonathan Kent goes to like save Superman from hell.
my favorite Superman issue of all time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great issue and like it's beautiful. Like Tom Grummett is like kicking ass on pencils on that one. But at the end of that issue, we get the little like preview for each of the different Supermen who came back. So same way here, we get a little preview of each of the different eras that we're going to for this arc. And that's really all that you need to care about with Superman Forever. Like Superman Forever, he very explicitly is like, I don't know, there was a big explosion. It was me and also me. We were there both. And then something happened. And now we're back to regular Clark Kent. It was the biggest hand wave I've ever seen, like even more so than the Power Rangers episode where the Green Ranger is like, hey, I used to be black. Why am I green now? And it's like, oh, there's a great explanation. And then they just cut to a new scene. Like more than that is what's going on with this one.
No, I have a headcanon about why and how it happened, but I want to put a pin in that until we get through the four eras.
Sure. I would love to hear it when we get there. So why don't we just pick an era that we like and start there?
Why don't we go chronologically and start with the Golden Age?
Yeah. So it's Superman Forever, and then it's Superman, the Man of Steel, 80 through 82 is the Golden Age material, and 83 is the Dominus Effect stuff. So yeah, talking about Superman, the Golden Age stuff. Of the 4 arcs, I would say this one is the most committed to its setting, I guess aside from the future one being a future setting. But I would say that, wow, goddamn, is this one, specifically the first issue in this group, the most prescient and the one that relates the most to modern day. Right. It's kind of creepy when you get into it because it's all about neo-Nazis and terrible, terrible people.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I've talked about on my show how John Bagdanoff, who did the art on Man of Steel, is really good at emulating other artists' style. And when I even talked about this issue on an episode of my show, I even kind of said that he was emulating the art style of the original Action Comics run. I take that back. I think it looks more like C.C. Beck on his original Captain Marvel art, but the feel of the art in this arc feels so Golden Age. And it just, especially the first issue where it's kind of taking elements from Action Comics #1 and kind of representing them in a slightly different format. It's so good.
It's crazy. They do some scene for scene things from Action Comics #1 here. And then they recontextualize it with this whole not
just regular Nazis.
Regular Nazis, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the American Nazi Party. Weird tangent on that. I'm kind of a history buff too, and I found out that the American Nazi Party had camps for children, for American children to go to kind of learn the Nazi way. And there was one about 30 miles from where I grew up, which explains a whole lot about the area where I grew up in rural Ohio. Sorry. Weird.
No, that is relevant because this feels very prescient. I will say, I see what you mean about the CC Beck in terms of the general action of things, especially the background details feel very CC Beck. Yeah. I think he's doing a really good job of doing the Joe Shuster faces.
Yeah. Where I was going with CC Beck is kind of like the eyebrows do a lot of the heavy lifting with Superman's expression, which reminds me a lot of the original Captain Marvel face.
I mean, either way, he's evoking the Golden Age stuff really well. Mm-hmm. And CC Beck is arguably one of the best Golden Age artists.
Yeah, for sure.
We deal with immigrants in Metropolis who have a bakery that are being vandalized by youths. They were we used to love these kids. These kids used to be great. And now because we're Jews, they're destroying. They don't actually say it though. They say that
they don't come on.
But
there's immigrants.
They have challah bread. It's very clearly coded that way.
Yeah. And then when the Nazi punks come back and harass them, the immigrants are telling Lois, they came in our shop, they beat us up. The Nazi punks turn in to go, that's a lie. Here, read real news. And they hand him this Nazi rag. And it's this rally to save America.
I know. It's so on point for the 2020s. And it's disgusting that it is. In the 90s, this felt remember the time when things were this bad. And now it's remember the now.
Yeah. Remember last week when something like this happened. And I've seen this on Twitter. It's rare, but every once in a while, there will be some white nationalist who will point out Superman as the poster boy for white nationalism because he's a white, strong man, blah, 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 American exceptionalism. It's rare, but I've seen it and it drives me nuts and I hate it. And that's exactly what happens in this when Superman shows up at this Nazi rally and they're like, yeah, it's the Ubermensch. Yeah. I'm like, oh, wow, that is scary.
Yeah, it reminds me, it makes me think of those Trump posters that you see where it's him as Superman. where they like take the Alex
On his
Ross art from the
NFTs.
Superman Forever for that matter, and like will like change the face to be Trump. One thing I really like is that they kind of play out the relationship between Superman and Lois here as developing in part because he is a champion of the oppressed here. They like really are like leaning into that element. First time Lois has like a big like he's so great, like literally he's adorable with like hearts in her thought bubble, is after he like saves these immigrants and like rushes off, because there is this question of like, well, what is he here for? Is he just like, I forget the name of them, the like New York vigilante group that like was on Hannity recently.
The Guardian Angels.
Yeah, the Guardian Angels. Is he like one of those where it's like kind of right wing and it's like really like we just want to beat up immigrants under the guise of public safety?
Yeah.
Right.
Or is he actually here to help people? And like here, he's here to help people. And that's a reason why you like really kind of love him. And I love that we get like all the golden age, like affect stuff. Like he just jumped into the sky and like, what, you know, rather than dealing with any of that.
It almost looks like he was flying.
Yeah, there is a moment like that, which is great. And like Superman, like is like very much a bully for justice.
Where he'll like punch someone in. You had that coming. Yeah.
Yeah. And we get like the car scene all over again. Like, in fact, like they do like a panel that is the exact cover of Action Comics in there. So they're not afraid to like really harken back to Action Comics #1 in this issue. And then we get the Atomic Skull. And this is the version I needed to double check. And I forgot to double check how the Atomic Skull originally appeared when he first showed up.
Wasn't pre-crisis Atomic Skull kind of like an international terrorist? Like he had his own like Cobra type organization or something like that?
At a quick glance, that's kind of what it looks like. But I couldn't tell you that much about the character because he's never really been like one of my like top characters.
Yeah.
The Atomic Skull here is a former actor turned Nazi spokesman. And damn, he's like, look at me. I am the strong man. You need to like support me. And Superman shows up to be like, this is bullshit, and like tries to start bullying him. But because the Atomic Skull starts to rat out his friends immediately because he's just
Megacorp steps in.
Yeah. they try to like the business interests like try to like kill everyone who's at this rally. And Superman saves them all. And they're like, man, the Ubermensch just saved us. He fucking loves us. And they all start like doing Hail Superman shit to him.
Which is followed by one of my most often shared segment of Superman panels where Superman stands up on stage and denounces Nazis and then turns around and smashes this giant Nazi concrete insignia, which is just
such
amazing.
A great panel. Before we started rolling, I was saying that. So I have a Samsung phone. I actually use Dex, the interface where you like plug it in and it turns it into a computer, mostly so that I can have it as like a decent work backup if ever I am without a computer or anything like that. I just like plug it into like my home setup or my office setup. And my desktop background for that is this panel. And so I did have a boss one time walk by and be like, is that a swastika on your desktop? And I was like, it's Superman punching a swastika.
Yeah.
You're like, aha.
And then that arc just keeps getting better and better, where Superman actually goes to Eastern Europe, where the Nazis are invading, and you see him helping out like these resistance fighters, and then stealing food for the people in the ghettos, and it warms it gives me chills every time I read it.
Yeah, it's
so good.
It's very much like we are going to deal with the horrors of history here.
Yeah.
And one thing that's interesting, though, is that it moves very fast through history. Like we get to the final solution in issue 2, which is a big jump from like Nazi sympathizers being like all over America, kind of like they even make a comment that's like it feels like a number of years has passed in just like a couple of months.
Yeah. It's, Dominus kind of tinkering with this world that he's created. And, where you said that Superman's going to deal with the horrors of history, that's something that Dominus even says later when we get the reveal that this is one of 4 alternate realities. Like, well, you could stay in this reality and out of my way. And in your reality, you could have ended World War II before it really, really got going. You could have stopped the atomic bomb from being dropped. You could have, taken care of Hitler. You could have saved all these people in the death camps. But you choose to go back to your own reality.
As much as it is, I mean, this is the one where he's actually breaking reality and like finding himself having just like done good deeds in our world. Like he frees all these Jews from the trains that are being like taken off to like be executed. And then it turns into a reality where he just saved a bunch of people from a fire.
Right. Caused by a neo-Nazi.
Yes. This is one where I think they just weren't all on the same page in terms of what is Superman actually going through.
Right.
Like, who is actually experiencing all this? Because, like, Lois is, like, kind of there, and, like, reality is, like, warping between them all. But it's also where, like, it becomes much more overt that Dominus is influencing things. I mean, for one thing, they do this thing where, like, every time Dominus, like, reaches for a person and it's, like, from his perspective, like, the arms disappear and you can see, like, the holes.
Okay, so I wasn't crazy thinking about that. Because I was like, that's a really weird art style for that.
Yeah, it's because, like, Dominus actually is just a floating head who has, like, an invisible body that, like, inhabits his gloves. He's kind of like a phantom limb.
Rayman.
or Rayman, yeah. So they do that as kind of, like, a reminder of, like, no, this is definitely Dominus here. Like, this is the person who's Dominus in the shot. Because it does look weird when you see it.
Yeah.
We get a very feisty Lois in this Golden Age stuff. I really love her just, like, punching Nazis and jodhpurs. Like, it's such a great look.
Yeah, Bogdanov, he does, even though his art style is weird and when he's in a rush, you can tell he's in a rush, especially when it comes to faces, but he draws some of the best Lois in the 90s, especially during the honeymoon where Clark has lost his powers and she has to go save him from drug dealers or something. And she's all buff and I'm like, yeah, that's Lois. Yeah.
He does great action shots and he does the choreography of his shots is really good. And that really plays to Lois Lane, woman of action.
Yeah. I don't mean any disrespect to Louise Simonson. Of the many writers that worked on the Superman books during the time, she is kind of my least favorite because it felt like everything that she did was kind of retreading her work from X Factor, especially in the early 90s. And I feel so bad saying this because she's like the only lady who worked on the Superman books at the time. And I feel bad about saying I don't like her work. But I think because Bogdanov was handling a lot of the writing chores for this story, I feel like that's one of the reasons it's so good because he does another story shortly after this that goes back into a lot of Cadmus stuff with Makari and Simeon, and that's a really, really fun story. And I kind of wish we got to see more Bogdanov's writing, honestly.
Yeah. As we saw when we looked at The Death and Return of Superman, the Man of Steel arc tends to be the most humanist. Like, it's really focused on, like, the people on the ground, like, what they're going through. I mean, fuck, man, we're dealing with, like, a literal concentration camp. It's showing the horrors of the world in a way that none of the other books are even going to touch.
Right.
And I feel like Louise Simonson starts that trend and, like, empowers Bogdanov to go that way. And at this point, she seems to be less on the throttle versus anything else. Like, she's co-plotting. He's doing the actual, like, scripting and everything in addition to drawing. I don't know. I like Simonson. I don't really want to, like, go too deep on this one because I have not spent as much time with a critical eye towards it as other eras, just because I grew up with these, so I haven't revisited this era as much because, like, I just remember it really well.
Okay. I do like her as a writer in general. I like her better in Marvel, but I do like her as a writer.
Yeah. But, like, this arc is easily, like, the standout in terms of just, like, do you want, like, why people dug Superman in the first place? Check out this guy fucking fighting Nazis. We get, like, the Nazi sympathizer murdered by Nazis because they have orders to just shoot down everyone. It's this is a dark comparison. It's kind of like how the Israeli hostages, when they were freed, were gunned down by Israeli troops.
Yeah.
A really dark thing to bring up, but this is remarkably prescient.
Yeah. And another comparison in that first issue, we get a U.S. senator, I think we get more than one, who are working with the Nazis, which I know is a real thing. Yeah. But it also feels like, you know, some stuff going on now with, you know, how some people in Congress seem to be on Russia's side and the whole Ukraine thing. And
yeah, what was that called? The business plot? Or something like that, like where like a bunch of, like, businessmen approached a general who was very right wing to, like, lead a coup of the United States and, like, join up with the Nazis. And he was, like, just by the book enough that he was like, no, this is fucked up. We're not doing that.
There was a movie that came out last year. It had Margot Robbie, it had Christian Bale in it, called Amsterdam. And it actually kind of goes into, like, a highly fictionalized version of that plot. And it's a really, really good movie.
Yeah. We also get to deal with this, like, lower powered Superman, like Nazi tanks, like, actually, like, bat him around a little bit, which is, like, kind of fun from a power standpoint. And then all of a sudden reality starts breaking and it starts becoming like a Kirby-esque tank.
It's a super tank.
Yeah. When did the Nazis get equipment like this? Well, Lois, no time to find out. Let's smash it.
Right. And then they break their way out of reality, which feels like very Matrix-y. Where it, like, emerges into, like, the real world.
I honestly feel like if these 4 story arcs had been completely self-contained, and these were all kind of imaginary stories that were kind of like, well, here's to get the audience back into like the history of traditional Superman. If this is like, here's this imaginary story in the Golden Age and the Silver Age and the Bronze Age and the future. Here's Superman compartmentalized. Now back to your regular continuity. That would have been really, in my opinion, better.
I see why they wanted to have a story arc that tied it all together. I think that the Dominus part of it wasn't interesting enough. Or really, like, if the conclusion was as psychological as the rest of the issues were, because, like, ultimately this is a 12-issue arc when you get down to it, because it's 4 books, 3 issues each in the respective eras, and then one issue that wraps up everything, of which the same plot happens in 2 of them, because I just think editorial wasn't as on top of it, this one, as it was back in the days of The Death and Return.
Yeah, this arc was as long as the reign of the Supermen and felt much longer.
Right. If that last issue had been more about like Superman fighting his way through the different realities or something like that, or like dealing with a circumstance that kept changing between the different realities, that could have been a much more interesting kind of thing that like tied it all together. As it is, once he's free of the different realities that he was in, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about this when we get to the end of this. Suffice it to say, I think that like Bogdanov doing the Golden Age is the most obvious choice you could make. And thus it is the right one here, because like he is the artist that if you're like, someone needs to do Joe Shuster, fucking yes. Like, obviously, this is the person. And it's kind of the way that we looked at Steel as having more elements of the Golden Age Superman than any of the imposters. Like that was the team that was like best suited into doing Golden Age Superman. Let's move on to the Silver Age. And I would say that we are talking about the same basic situation, because man, if someone wanted to be a Kurt Swan impersonator, Tom Grummett is a really good choice. It's unfortunate that he's not doing the pencils in the first issue of this arc, the Adventures of Superman series. Sorry, there's so many Superman books. I like paused for a second there. But we still have Carl Kiesel and Jerry Ordway doing the stories. The first issue of this arc is the weirdest to me, because like it's very much leaning into the stuff of modern age, but in the cloak of the Silver Age. Like we've got a Connell Superboy, although this is before he was called that. We've got Steel. That
was really interesting. I'll be honest, when I read this overall arc before, I've always skipped the Adventures of Superman one, because, you know, like I said, the Silver Age doesn't really resonate with me much, even though I'm trying to kind of educate myself better on it. I completely missed the thing about, you know, that there's Connell Superboy in a like traditional Superboy costume, and then Steel was there too. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. And this story kind of really won me over the more I actually read it.
So the Adventures of Superman goes for each issue being basically its own standalone thing. I enjoy them riffing on the Jimmy is playing like a different superpowered role kind of one. It feels like a classic Silver Age story, and I dig that kind of element to it. It's just interesting where they're like, we're going to have a Superboy with a backwards baseball cap. He's Superboy. Sure is.
He sure does like girls. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Steel has like no design difference from his like modern form. Like it's just like a simplified costume.
Like, oh, he's smiling because it's the Silver Age and we're all friendly. We're all pals. We're all chums. But, you know, you mentioned Grummett, and I think it's appropriate that I think it was the second issue of the Adventures arc where Kismet first appears, because, you know, you mentioned Adventures 500 earlier. I know Kismet appeared before that. I think she appeared in Time and Time Again, but Adventures 500 is where I most think of Kismet. She plays the biggest role, and Grummett drew that
wonderful like 2-page like shot of her like just like floating in the void from that issue. Yeah.
And that's where I want to pull that pin that I was talking about earlier. They never explain it, but if Kismet, they make it clear that Superman always has been Kismet's champion, and Kismet, for the listeners don't know, is kind of like DC's equivalent of Eternity. She kind of embodies the universe and balances order and chaos, stuff like that. My headcanon is Kismet did it. You know, the embodiment of the universe who is kind of a stand-in for DC, you know, in general, just put Superman back together in his traditional form because she knew Dominus was coming.
Okay, that makes a decent amount of sense. And considering how things will play out from this arc, that also is like kind of interesting to think about.
And I know everyone who ever talks about Superman has said that the Electric Superman era was so rushed, and there's no why to any of it. So it doesn't really matter. But I like my why. I like my explanation. I don't care if it's the Superboy Prime punched reality real hard.
Right.
Just give me an explanation.
I think it actually is really interesting and would play very well with like a scene explaining it. We'll get to this later, but like Kismet ultimately becomes Strange Visitor, who is a female version of Electric Blue Superman. So I like that kind of like interplay of Kismet's role with Superman and like, and those powers. Like, I think that actually is really cool. So I do actually rather like that, like headcanon. I wish they did a scene that would like make that happen.
Yeah. I don't think DC knows why it happened. So it's up to us to do the heavy lifting.
It certainly feels like, hey, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I saw a case before we got started. I was like, I feel like they kind of tried to redo this again with like the New 52 launch. Because they used the same little girl motif for Pandora when they brought everything over. And I was like, I just feel like I've seen this before. I feel like I've seen this whole interaction happen before when I was reading this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like, the Electric Superman era was kind of as well thought out as the New 52.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I would even argue Electric Blue Superman was like better thought out than New 52. New 52 is notoriously poorly thought out.
Yeah. I like Electric Blue Superman. Honestly, I like the idea of it more than a lot of the execution, but there's elements of it I really like.
Yeah. So this first issue, we get them playing baseball, and that's fun. They're playing baseball with Sputnik, which I find hilarious. It feels appropriately like goofy Silver Age. And then Jimmy Olsen is found to be replaced by an alien, or rather, we think that he is an alien. He's been transformed into an alien because an alien shows up wearing Jimmy's clothes and taking pictures and seems so childish and nice and has like a Midas touch that like turns everything to gold. So people are excited about this whole thing. Meanwhile, there is a Krypton park that they check out that has like all these sort of like affects of Krypton going on, such as thought beasts.
Where Lois is thinking about marrying Superman.
Right, exactly. I love that when we see Cadmus, we see 4 Dabney Donovans there.
Yeah.
That's like such a fun thing. Dabney Donovan is such a sinister fucking figure, and the idea of a goofy Silver Age version of the character is great. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and especially with Kessel writing, because Kessel really liked to dig into the Cadmus stuff. He really loved to use Dabney Donovan. He uses them in the Electric Blue area when he brings back Boss Moxie in his goons. He uses them in the Guardians of Metropolis miniseries, which I absolutely love. I mean, Kessel is hands down one of my favorite writers of the 90s. And it's just, every time Dabney Donovan pops up, I'm very thrilled.
Obviously a love letter to Cadmus stuff in general, anything that like Kessel's working on, because Kessel loves like Jack Kirby stuff. So anything he can bring in from like Kirby's like various runs, he's going to like definitely have it in the books that he's working on.
Right.
And then the rest of this issue, like Lex Luthor kidnaps what we think is Jimmy to like use him to like fund him taking over the world, I guess, with gold, because that's how that all works. And then plot twist, it turns out it wasn't Jimmy all along. It was just a random alien who showed up, kidnapped Jimmy, put him in a closet, took his clothes, and then just like wandered around for a bit. And it's like, well, it's not really a big deal. He was a nice little kid who like cranned a picture of Superman, which is the cover of this issue. And we see Superman like writing in his like super diary, which is such a fucking Silver Age thing.
Super diary.
It's very cute.
I do love seeing the Golden Age like giant key for the fortress.
Yeah.
I have to say this every single time. It blew my mind when I found out that those giant arrows were a thing, like a real thing that exists in the world.
Yeah.
And that it made perfect sense under like Eisenhower's America to be like, oh yeah, well, those pilots need, are flying so far up. Like they need like markers to indicate like which way they're going. Like that's so goddamn cool, but it feels like fantasy. When we talk about it, they are a real thing. And it was like a clever thing for Superman to use as a key. So it's just like kind of fun to see it again. The next issue in this arc is actually probably my favorite issue of this arc, because we get the Day of the Super Comet where we get Grummet's back. Like I said, Grummet doing like Kurt Swan kind of artwork. Perfect choice. Like if you want just like clean, simple and elegant Superman, Grummet is a great choice if you don't have Kurt Swan to do it.
Is this the one with the red kryptonite?
No, this is the one with everyone getting superpowers in the city.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Which I think is a perfectly fine, fun Superman story.
Yeah.
It's just as much as the previous one was like every character is a modern character, but like a Silver Age version of a modern character like Emil Hamilton. We got Maggie Sawyer in this as a super cop, which I really like her like Guardian style outfit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like that's the Guardian's outfit.
Yeah,
only with a skirt.
Yeah,
it's very nice.
It's very good, and she's got giant handcuffs, which is a lot of fun. The Super Newsboy is a lot of fun. Like all of that is great fun. Like the fact that everyone in the city bought super costumes that they then wore under their clothes so that they could explode out during a bank robbery, because I guess the bank robbers weren't in the city at the time. Right. It's all goofy, but they make references to digital cameras. They have references to like just modernity that wouldn't make sense in the era. And it's sort of this like weird blurring of the lines there. And I think this is, again, like they weren't quite sure like what things they were keeping from modern versus like excluding, like where were they trying to have the reality break. I will say, and I don't remember if it was this way in the print editions or not, but the coloring is very aggressive in this issue. A lot of gradients for everyone's faces and skin tones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was like flatter on the comics or if like the coloring itself is like one of the tip-offs that like this is like a more modern comic that has been blurred into it all.
Yeah, I think this is during that era that they were bringing in digital enhancements or touch-ups, whatever, to go on top of Glenn Whitmore's colors. But just the fact that he colored every Superman book pretty much the entire 90s is a phenomenal feat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good looking book. It's just I'm just like curious, like, because the penciling is so close to like a 60s Kurt Swan, but the coloring is so different that it's an interesting juxtaposition. Side note, this is the first time I ever saw the Silver Age version of Metallo, because I think I read this before I read Whatever Happens to the Man of Tomorrow. And if I didn't, then my brain is just wrong and I'm mistaken. But either way, it's fun to see the Silver Age Metallo. He is an interesting design. I love that it's just a door hinge that opens and it's just like, here's kryptonite. Like, it's like, here's a little vault. Like I might as well have just a tiny little key that opens it up, or like a combination, and it's like popped open.
Every time I start to read a Silver Age story, I have to put my mindset, what would I think was really neat and really cool if I were 9? If I was 9, this would be the awesomest thing I've ever seen in my whole life.
Right. Or go for the camp and as like an adult and be like, oh yeah, this is what we're putting out there for kids. Haha, those are funny jokes that are inside jokes for adults.
Right. But I do love that Dan Turpin is the one that saves the day in this, because he don't want those superpowers. And I love Dan Turpin. I'm listening to the audio drama of Final Crisis right now on YouTube, and I just love listening to Dan Turpin. I think he's an amazing character. You know, one of Jack Kirby's like probably greatest creations. Yeah.
I wish that the comics one looked like the show one, which just looks like Jack Kirby.
Like Jack Kirby.
It's so fun seeing him, but I also will say, Jmike, do you remember in the like the World Without Superman arc where like Turpin and Supergirl are like down fighting the mutants, and he's just like down to his like a wife beater and boxers?
Yeah,
and he just looks like a wall of muscle.
He looks like if Ben Grimm hit 50 and decided without superpowers and decided to become a cop.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ben Grimm is Jack Kirby, so that like works really well. Yeah, Jack, he's the king. He's certainly the king. And then we get Mr. Mxyzptlk popping in. It's a classic, like have him read a bunch of stuff and have Killtepsi Zim hitting in there.
Right. Curses! You made me read my name backwards.
Right?
How did you do it? It's that time of the year again, you know. See you next year.
Yep.
And then we get the girl show up and everyone's confused and yada, yada, yada. Moving on to the next issue. So we get a Toyman appearance and then we get a Batman appearance. And I do enjoy this like back and forth on Batman stuff, like the Batman goofs, the gifts that he give that are like, here's bat themed boxes of chocolates.
Right.
With
a tracking device in it.
Right. Yeah. Here it had a bat pager in it, and it like led us to this thing. This is where we get the red kryptonite, which is surprisingly a non-issue in this whole thing. Like it makes Superman's head big. They don't even like indicate that he has like super intelligence or like telekinetic powers or any of the things that would have usually entailed with a red kryptonite appearance.
Just a big head.
I enjoy that he figured out a way of doing around by having like a moose lodge kind of thing, like the Hidden Masters Club tonight. And he had to wear the helmet, and also planned on having Perry White have it as well, so that like there would be a cover and like no one would get mad at him for wearing the hat because the boss had to wear it too.
Right. It was very, very silly. That was kind of the part that I kind of skimmed over the most. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for camp at the moment, but I thought the Batman-Superman relationship in this one was fascinating, where Jonathan and Martha had adopted Bruce Wayne too, and the two of them grew up together as foster brothers. That was really neat.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's
apparently that's
really
from
fun idea.
An imaginary story.
No kidding.
Yeah,
damn.
really.
Like I said, I got to get on the Silver Age stuff.
Yeah, it reminded me of the Speeding Bullets story though as well. J.M. Mateus story where Superman crash lands at Wayne Manor and is raised as Bruce.
Right.
But yeah, like having like the Kents raise both of them is wild. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess they both could be at an orphanage at the same time.
Right.
That works well enough. And then like the Batman was Robin first thing is very much a pre-crisis concept.
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of fun to see that there. Like it works pretty well.
And it kind of explains why this character who became like a dark avenger of the night to, bring justice to the world was so suddenly happy and go lucky like he was in the 60s. Like, well, it's not about, justice and revenge. It's about keeping up with you, brother.
Right.
I thought that was really neat.
And it's like, I put on the most brightful colored costume to draw attention away from you. I'm like, that's a good explanation for the Robin suit, actually. Like, yeah. Like, yeah. All right. Yeah, that works in a weird way. And it's like kind of fun.
Go get him, decoy boy.
But then the whole reality breaks down. Emil Hamilton shows up with Jor-El and Lara in tow. And like in the Silver Age, they showed up way more than you'd think for two characters who have to be dead for Superman to make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Time travel shenanigans and stuff.
That was like an imaginary story, though, like a what if scenario. Yeah,
and so we see a little bit of the breakdown of reality here, where like Kismet kind of reveals like some of the different versions, but like the problem is it's like Tom Grummett like draws like Tom Grummett, like he looks like Kurt Swan, but like his art doesn't look like John Bogdanov, like no matter how much he tries. And these future Superman difference, which is just the haircut being different, isn't really that dramatic. So there's like these three panels where it's like, oh, all the different styles, but like it's too much of a close up to like really tell that it's that much of a style shift.
Yeah, even the Golden Age Superman was missing some of the details. Like the S wasn't like just a regular triangle, and he didn't have the what I think it was like ballerina strap boots.
Yeah, I mean he's got the close up. You can see that it is supposed to be a triangle, but it's cut off so much that you can barely tell, and so you lose that detail, and you don't see the rest of his like costume details. But it's like, oh yeah, we put Batman here with this like weird bullshit story to like try to like be a protector and snap you out of it, and then we get this like fucked up, broken-handed Emil Hamilton, but the hand is still floating because he's actually Dominus gesturing, and everything fades to white and whatnot. It's doing Silver Age stuff like that. It's fine.
Speaking of Dominus, have you guys ever watched a show called The Aquabats?
No. What was that from?
It's this weird, the Aquabats is this like actual musical group, and their whole shtick is they dress up like a superhero team where they all wear the same thing. And they had a series for a while. It was just weird adventures of them traveling around the country and doing superheroics. And on the season finale, the arch villain of the show is this giant white floating head. And it looks so much like Dominus. It cracks me up every time I see it. I know that I'm like going off on references that probably nobody else gets outside of like me and like three other people, but I just had to throw that out there.
Yeah, the Dominus of design I don't hate. I do kind of wish that it wasn't his whole head. I kind of wish that it was just like the painted portion of his face that was like the floating part there and like made it even more of a void.
Almost like a Johnny Sorrow kind of design.
Yeah, exactly. And this might be because I just did a rewatch of Reboot season 3 and 4. And so Hexadecimal is always going to be on my mind because she's amazing. But yeah, like Johnny Sorrow is like a good like comparison point from comics. I think that'd be more interesting than what we ultimately got because he's a floating head who has like a body to him, but it's like not really a body. Let's talk about the Bronze Age, the polyester years, as it were. I feel like it's like kind of sort of like fully Bronze Age, but it's like not distinct enough from the Silver Age stuff.
It's not. It doesn't feel like an actual era of Superman comics. It feels like just a reference to 1978 as a whole.
Yeah.
Because, we get a mechanical shark that's attacking people. Oh, that's obviously Jaws. And here's all these really amazing fashions that I'm just drooling over because I want all those clothes. And and like every outfit the Lois wears with the big white butterfly collar, and then like, oh man, that looks so good. But yeah, it doesn't feel like a Bronze Age Superman comic. It just feels like a love letter to the 70s.
Yeah,
which is fine with me. Because I love 70s music and clothes and architecture styles and all that stuff. And I just moved into a mid-century modern house. I love that kind of era, but
yeah, the look of this book is really good, but I don't think of Prankster as a Bronze Age character. I think of Prankster as being another Silver Age character. And the only difference here is that it's a 3-issue arc as opposed to individual stories. Like, it feels like more Silver Age stuff to me, even though we got the GBS and he's a TV reporter and it's all that. You know what would have really made this like feel like a distinct, like it's a Bronze Age arc? If this was like the Kryptonite No More Superman, like if he had like the sideburns and like they were like really leaning into that, and like the depowered Superman of like, after the Sandman Superman like took like half of his power and like he was left in this like weaker form and on TV and like all those things.
That would be really cool. Yeah.
But they don't really do that here.
That being said, I'm surprised with how much I like the Prankster. Much I like. Yeah,
I didn't think it was him.
Pudgy guy in a bad suit. Like when they redesigned the Prankster in the 2000s to make him like a used car salesman, I feel like you lose a lot of that character because he's just so weird, and I love the weirdness of him.
I really didn't think it was the Prankster. I was like, okay, it's going to be Mr. Mixapitalik again.
Yeah.
And I was like, this has got to be. I was waiting for the reveal, and I was like, oh, they're sticking with this. Oh, okay, this is cool, I guess. Still kind of disappointed that it wasn't the fifth imp, but the fifth dimensional imp.
Right.
Well, and like that's the thing. Like all of these issues feel like they could have just been Mr. Mixapitalik stuff too. Like,
yeah,
it didn't need to have a new villain kind of thing. This could have been a really cool Mixapitalik story.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, like the My Adventures of Superman, Mr. Mixapitalik appearance is closest to this arc in general because he like has Superman like snap through the different versions.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually rather like this arc. It's fun to be like, yeah, we're going to do Prankster, who is a villain that we just can't do legitimately in the modern world. Like he has a level of camp and a level of like kind of goofiness that like you need that retro vibe, really kind of like take it home. And we want to do a 3-issue arc, which you just can't do if you're doing Silver Age, but you can do in Bronze Age. So cool. All right. I'm here for those elements of it. I'm here for the cattiness between Lois and Lana. I think that that's really fun. Having more of an emphasis on Lana is nice because she became a big character in the 70s. Yeah. Those are good calls. Is this, like I said, really feeling like it's the Bronze Age? Well, from an art standpoint, yes.
It's a period piece more than the 4 goons that worked for the Prankster in this. Did you feel like those were supposed to be a reference to famous people in the 70s? Because the big guy, the big muscly guy that always wears like the hat, when they do a close-up on him, he looks like Sylvester Stallone, but I could not place everybody else. Or am I
That's
just
a good
spitballing?
question, because I was looking at them and being like, oh, they are very distinct archetypes.
Mm-hmm. Like I thought maybe they were supposed to be adult versions of the Sweat Hogs from Welcome Back, Kotter, but I don't know.
I think this might also be an area where like they might be making 70s references, but me being a child of the 80s and 90s don't quite get them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was kind of laughing because like I was looking at everyone holding up their guns and I was like, of course the black guy's gun is sideways. When I saw their frame, I just started laughing. My girlfriend's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, look. I was like, this is just trying to be cool.
Very funny.
I mean, I like the gang. I love their like nicknames.
That looks awesome.
Like, I mean, it feels kind of like a Mod Squad kind of thing, I guess. Like, I don't know the specific reference that they're making, but it feels right. I enjoy Jimmy Olsen being a gadget guy kind of thing for this era.
Yeah, that's really neat.
It gives him a distinct thing that he's doing in this.
When I first started reading 90s Superman, I really did not like Immonen's art at first because he first comes on in the long-haired era. And every issue he drew, it felt like the long hair was an afterthought, like he was trying to get away with drawing Superman with traditionally short hair, and editorial went no. And so the inker went in and just drew this ink of blackness that comes off the back of his head. But man, he draws a good traditional looking Superman. I really like Stuart Immonen.
Yeah, same issue with the adventure stuff where like the regular artist isn't the first artist for the first issue. Like Immonen coming back, you're like, yeah, no, this looks good. Immonen drew one of my favorite Superman, which is the Superman Secret Identity story. And so like he can do an amazing looking Superman, but he does have a level of detail that like sometimes like he can do like a more like restricted style, like when he did Next Wave Agents of Hate. But when he's doing his normal style, I think it's difficult to color that fast on a monthly book for the level of detail that his figures require, versus if you have more time, those are when you can really bring out all the features of what he's working on. And I don't feel like he's really holding back in any particular way in this book. Like it's set in the 70s, but it's not like, it doesn't like look like a Bronze Age book. I don't know. It's an interesting juxtaposition in terms of like the Golden Age stuff is like very Golden Age and the Silver Age stuff is like pretty Silver Age. And this one feels like kind of Bronze Age.
I do have a question, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a scene where Superman is pulling up the anchor and the prankster has Lana. He's talking to Superman. And there's a hand on Lana's shoulder. Is that from the prankster being a dick? Or is that Dominus right behind her?
Oh, it's a prank that he did.
Okay, because like it wasn't really clear. Or at least I missed that part. It might
be a lead-in. I forget if the prankster ends up being like one of the Dominus figures. But it's supposed to be he's just got a fake hand kind of thing.
Okay, I was like, did I miss something? Oh no!
He's a prankster. He's got all the goofy shit.
I figured, but I was fucking his ass.
But as we scroll through, it might prove that it was also like a secret hint as well. Kent gets fired from being a TV news reporter, which is always awkward for Superman. You know, like it was supposed to be a thing that he didn't choose and was forced upon him. But it is weird having a Superman who has to like disappear before making a TV announcement. But it's kind of fun to have like Clark and Lois like vibe with each other at the end of the second issue. This is the romance that we kind of wanted to see happen back in the day, but it didn't. Also, now that I'm saying it, it's also weird that Lois has brown hair in all these. Prior to the Man of Steel issue 3, I think it was the Lois-centric issue, or rather issue 2, pardon me. Lois had been presented as being black-haired, having like blue or gray highlights instead of the auburn brown highlights that had become popular from that point on. So also in terms of like making her look more retro, they should have made her hair darker is I guess what I'm getting at.
I think at certain frames looks red too.
And that might have been, like we were talking about with the Silver Age story where they were blurring elements of traditional continuity in with this broken reality.
Yeah. I do really enjoy the end of the issue where Lois and Clark actually look like they're going to get together just because like she's finally realized like, oh yeah, no, Clark Kent's like great. Like he's 6'2", super nice, like in great shape, writes really well, like speaks really well when he's on TV. Like it makes sense that he would be a catch. And it's like kind of cool that Lois like finally like feeling a little down on her luck after like being like put down by Lana a whole bunch in this issue and having her leg broken and all that. And like being like, you know what? Superman's like, he's nice, but he's not Clark. And it's like kind of fun to see like a retro version of that relationship because like this is 1977. Like this is not too far off from when the Superman movie came out. And it's like, oh, we're kind of seeing that relationship play out.
No, the one thing I liked about all these stories is that they don't fall back on the old trope of, Clark pretending to be a wimp so that no one suspects, being Prince Adam so that no one suspects he's He-Man. That's the one thing that bugs me about reading the Golden Age stuff is that, how wimpy Clark has to pretend to be. And then Lois is like, yo, you're such a coward. I could never date you.
Yeah. So the next arc is, it's a prose issue. It kind of made me think of like an Elliot S. Maggin kind of thing where it's all told by text boxes with images supporting it, which I guess is era specific in a good way. It didn't jump at me immediately that way, but like rereading it now with that like kind of critical eye, I'm like, okay, yeah, I kind of see that as what's going on here. It is certainly different from the other books that we've seen. So I guess that one might be the closest to being more of a classic style issue. And then we've got Lois being like kind of crazy and trying to murder Superman with a rocket launcher.
Right.
After she pushes the prankster off a bridge.
One thing that struck me about the prose, it almost felt like they were going into like kind of a Nietzschean I will show you the Ubermensch kind of philosophical take on what is a hero, and a hero, a godlike being is beyond good and evil, which is another Nietzschean thing. And it's not until you realize that it's Dominus talking that all of a sudden he goes from like very deep and philosophical to because I'm in charge and I have to be in charge because I have to. And he really just goes from philosophical to petulant, just like it's like a teenager writing bad poetry all of a sudden. That's one of the things that bugs me about Dominus. I don't understand his motivation. He wants to be God of the universe, but why? Why do you want to be God of the universe? Because I have to be. Okay, but why do you have to be? What is it that you want? And I don't get it.
And we'll find out a little bit more when we get to the final arc for it, but it never feels like much. Like Dominus is like a very much a generic cosmic villain that has no real motivation. But let's knock out the last era in this Eras tour. So this is the 1,000 Years in the Future, 2999 era.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to be based on an imaginary story where it's like, here's the descendant of Superman being Superman, which is a time-honored trope at this point. Like your call sign for your show is Truth and Justice, which is like the House of L stuff from Future State. Like that's such a thing that people really love. Even like the regrettable J. Michael Straczynski arc has like, Superman's going to have a legacy. He's going to have a dynasty of superheroes that come after him.
Yeah.
That's all part of this. Like you could see this very much as being like part of the line that leads to Cal Kent, the Superman for Superman 1 million.
That's the interesting thing about the timing of this, because this came out like, I think as this arc is wrapping up is when 1 million is beginning, which I have to wonder, I have to believe that the people writing Superman all share notes, even if you're not writing the main Superman book. And I'd like to assume that Jurgens knew what was coming. And he went, well, okay, here's my chance to kind of add to the Superman dynasty that's explored more in Superman Man of Tomorrow. But it kind of feels like a half-ass attempt to do 1 million right before 1 million came out, which really makes it feel like the dollar store version of 1 million.
Yeah. I think that this arc is my least favorite of the four. Yeah. It's not doing anything I think that's like particularly unique. Like there's a lot of Silver Age throwback stuff in here, but like aside from them being like, must there be a Superman? Our technology is so advanced. Like it's just more Elseworlds, like future Superman or alternate state Superman kind of stuff. Like it's very similar to DC 1 million, like you said. It made me think of a lot of stuff from Superman Legend of Dead Earth, stuff that was like going on around the same time. I think that annual was what, like 96, 95?
I thought we were getting Legion here.
Yeah, exactly. It's also like right before the Legion, and the Legion's such a, like, Christ, man. Like if we're looking for an era for Superman, like Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes would have been like a great era to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Mr. and Mrs. Superman, the recurring feature about Earth 2 Superman that was running throughout the 60s and 70s, where he's married to Lois and like, is settled down and has a family, and like that whole like chain of things. Like you could have done any of that.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. I love Earth 2 Superman. When it comes to pre-crisis, if I have to shoot between Earth 1 and Earth 2, I will always choose Earth 2, and I love Mr. and Mrs. Superman. I think it's so much fun. I actually had like a comic as a kid. There was a bunch of reprints of those Mr. and Mrs. Superman stories, and I loved it.
Yeah, so like any of those would have been way more fun. Like as it is, this is future setting Superman, but we're going to do a very Silver Age style story for the character. Like and the design choice, the only difference is his hair is parted differently, and not even in a way that's like, it doesn't have the S curl. It's like, it's parted on the side. It
looks like New 52 Superman's hair. If they'd done the New 52 Superman costume, if it had existed, if they'd put him on this future Superman, it would have looked more like a future Superman, because now it looks like he's wearing future technology. Right.
Yeah.
That would have been really neat.
Yeah, his costume is just regular Superman costume.
Yeah. And, this is me going up on a bit of a negative tear again. I respect Jurgens a lot for kind of shepherding the Superman titles. I think when most people think of 90s Superman, I think most people think of the Electric Blue era as kind of the last chapter, and everything after it, before all the creators switched over, is just kind of an epilogue. I kind of feel like by this time Jurgens had kind of run out of ideas.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because everyone says, well, how do you challenge Superman? Either you give him a really, really powerful foe, or you do something where you have to think of the way out of a problem. and they couldn't think of a way for him to think his way out of a problem, so they just gave him an omnipotent foe. And like that, it feels lazy.
Yeah, and like the story that we get with like this Clint Carr character, it just feels like Silver Age Superman. Like I just feel like there would have been a better era to go with it. And I'm not trying to like really poo-poo it, because the actual stories are fine. Like Superman dealing with a world where the technology has kind of outmoded him is fine. The robots all attacking because AI goes crazy, also fine. Like I'm fine with that. It just feels like more Silver Age though than what we needed, so it doesn't actually feel like a different era.
I mean, it even retreads the Silver Age Justice League story, with the cosmic chess game.
Exactly. Like it just feels like more of that, which is fine. The goal of this arc is to do retro Superman so that we can appreciate modern Superman, but it's just not doing anything that really stands out the way that Gold or Silver Age especially, and the Bronze Age stuff, which is really more 70s love than Bronze Age specifically, but still it feels like a period piece. This one is like, well, we're in the fucking future.
Yep. And they did the $29.99 logo very similar to look like the Marvel $20.99 logo. So I feel like they were retreading that. And another reason that I feel like Jurgens was kind of out of ideas, he'd already done the cosmic chess game retread in the early 90s, in that era of Justice League between Panic in the Sky and the Death of Superman, where Superman was on the Justice League. It was just the Weapons Master instead of Despero or in Muto in this case. He's already done the thing where you play the chess game and you make the wrong move and your teammate disappears and oh, did they die? I don't know. So it's just, I don't know. I want to like Jurgens. I respect his work so much, but after going over a lot of his stuff in Rebirth, which I want to like more than I do, and then reading this, I'm like, man, Dan, you got to step up your game, dude.
Yeah. Like when we get to like the future, like Justice League, it's just Batman, Aquaman, and Green Lantern, and like there's nothing that interesting about them. Like Aquaman's Australian. Like, I guess that's the interesting part for him. And Batman has like yellow highlights on his costume, and he's called the Bat instead.
Yeah.
The Green Lantern is just a Green Lantern and like doesn't play differently than any other Green Lantern who has ever Green Lanterned. Yeah. It's just more of that. And that's kind of a bummer.
Especially what we're getting right around the corner with the Justice Legion Alpha, with psychic Batman of Pluto or where the hell he's from, and then Neptune Aquaman, and there's only one Green Lantern ring and left in the whole universe. It's on Mars, and no. And like this feels so Rice Krispies without sugar. Yeah. It just feels bland.
Like I like the Supergirl costume that shows up because it's a classic Supergirl costume, but you know what? Like that's a Bronze Age thing. Like it's not even like a new costume. Like it's just a callback to a different era.
I did like Martian Manhunter as a
Shazam,
the Captain Marvel of the future. That was neat. I was like, oh, that's cool. Then Wonder Woman's old. Okay, cool. She got gray hair. She looks like Earth 2 Infinity Incorporated Wonder Woman. Sure, that's it. That's like I'm saying. I could have done without this story just altogether.
They could have found a better era to do than what they did.
Yeah.
It certainly felt like a placeholder until the end arc goes on, and then we get more of the Dominus stuff.
It wasn't great.
Yeah. And like I was saying at the beginning, I feel like taking my headcanon into account, if you do kind of a Age of Apocalypse treatment on this, it's like you have Superman Forever, which is Age of Apocalypse Alpha, and then you do these 3 months worth of stories, and then you did an Omega, standalone issue that had just tied up everything after. It's like, okay, something weird happened. Superman split into 4 realities, and now we're going to get this one shot that end caps it on the other end. It just wraps it all up, and it just sets continuity back to the status quo. And you could have done without this extra month of Dominus that came after.
Yeah, because then we just have this Dominus arc where he's trying to hunt down Kismet, and it cuts short the Superman future timeline one anyway. So it certainly feels like an afterthought of all of them anyway, regardless. But we get the same fucking Wave Rider story twice. We have 4 issues to tell a story. They tell the same story twice, and then they have a wrap up to the second time they do the story because they just didn't have enough story for 4 issues. They had enough story for maybe 2.
Yeah, like I said, you could have done like a double-sized one-shot that is like, here's what's really going on. Okay, we figured out that it's Dominus at the end of the 4th monthly title. Now we got to go through all this crap. of Superman trying to find, and if they'd gone, here's the challenge. Here is both the foe that is very powerful for Superman to fight, and he's so powerful that Superman has to think his way around the problem. That could have been really, really cool. But it's just that Wave Rider saves the day for him by taking the embodiment of eternity, of the DC's equivalent of eternity, and yoinking her into a little girl.
Yep.
Okay, man. How is the universe still functioning? I don't know. But, because Dominus is in charge of the universe now.
One thing I did catch is that they keep talking about how Lois has a Lamborghini at this point, and I don't remember why she has a Lamborghini.
She got it in the wedding.
She got it in the wedding album. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very big detail in this as for what.
Or she revealed that she had it because she's used all of her award money, that she saved up all her award money. And that's where they drive off from the wedding, as they drive off in Lois's Lamborghini.
Okay, there we go. Jesus Christ. So we deal with Kismet being at this all right, so these are real, these old holdover houses that exist in these major cities where it's here's the last house in New York City. Those exist.
It's the plot of Up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's wondering, these are real, where we have these houses that are just a historical site that still exist. And here is where Kismet hides out. Cool. All right. We have 4 issues where we deal with this shit for no fucking reason.
And it's an interesting subplot. I like the subplot. I guess they introduced Lex's Hypersector in Superman Forever, because I just kind of was dropped into it okay, here's Hypersector. But I really like the subplot of Lex buying out the planet and laying everybody off and trying to scoop this old man out of his house. It just didn't need to be shoehorned into the story. It could have been its own side thing. That was the good thing about 90s Superman. If you didn't care about what Superman was doing this month because everyone thinks he's dead again, or you don't like Conduit, here's this neat thing with Ron Troop and Lucy Lane and all this other crap that's sometimes more interesting than the main drama. But they shoehorned the subplot into the main plot, which is I didn't like it.
Yeah. And so ultimately, because nothing really matters, they sneak Kismet away into the past and then fuse her into the body of the girl that was going to die in front of Superman pretty horrifically, which is a big change to time if you think about it.
Right. I think the way they wrote it is that it explains why Kismet has always chosen Superman to be her champion, because, Wave Rider, I can't change the past. I can't change the past. It's like he's connecting a time loop. It's like a Back to the Future thing where it's Kismet's always eventually going to get shoved into the body of this girl, Sharon, which explains why Kismet is so drawn to Superman, because Clark saved her from dying and blah, blah, blah. But it cheapens the fact that Kismet just chose Superman because he's so good and because he's also really powerful.
Everything has to have a bow on it, even the bows. So we're constantly refining even further. No, it's not even just because you're that great a hero. It's because you're such a great hero to this specific aspect of eternity. You saved me when I was a child, kind of thing, or when I was fused with a child. My point is that Superman witnessing one of his friends dying as a child is a very distinct emotional beat for his life. That is a big change to history, that all of a sudden he just saved a person, even if he doesn't notice it.
Now, one thing I do have to say, as far as the last issue of the arc, one of the bright points of this whole thing, it was really neat that they brought in Jim Starlin to draw it. That was cool.
Yeah.
I don't love a lot of Starlin's writing for DC, with the exception of Cosmic Odyssey, although he didn't need to make Jon Stewart accidentally let a planet explode. But I still really, really like his art here, especially with Joe Rubinstein doing the inks, because Rubinstein did a lot of 70s and 80s inks for other artists. He did a big stint on Captain America that I really like as an inker. Just the opening scene, the wave dancer kind of pirouetting through space.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that looks really cool.
Yeah, this last issue of Superman, which is Superman 138, that ties it all together. Honestly, you could skip every other issue of the last 4 of these arcs. Yeah, it reminded me, honestly, the dancing made me think of the Miracle Man arc with Alan Moore at the end, where he's dancing as he tries to emote his thoughts about London being destroyed.
Right.
Wave Rider, it feels poetic. It feels like modern dance in a way that's really cool.
It reminded me of Alan Davis drawing Excalibur back in the day, and where Megan would, unleash her elemental blah, blah, blah and dance and infuse the universe with cosmic gibberish. It felt very 70s. It felt very kind of 80s. It was just really neat. Much better than Starlin's art all through Death of the New Gods. This one issue looked really, really pretty.
Yeah, like it looks good.
So
It does look really good. It's just not 4 issues worth of material.
Right. Are you guys ever planning on covering the King of the World story arc, or can we talk about how this leads into that?
So I was curious if we'd get into that one too much, because I kind of feel like we should at some point. Like maybe this is just like a reason we should have you back on.
Okay.
Because like, hey, yeah, Dominus like shows up again there. At the end of this one, he's like, I'll be back, Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Which is all fine. But if it was only going to be this arc, it didn't need to be a new villain. The fact that Dominus shows up again for King of the World, which I think we should probably talk about after looking at this, because that's kind of the end note of the from John Byrne's run to like to the Y2K era, like reboot of the character in the 2000s. I think that is a good like touchstone on that one.
Right.
But you are welcome to tease any major points you want to say about it.
Well, I really liked King of the World when it started out, because at the beginning of that story arc, Superman gets exposed to synthetic kryptonite, and there's no immediate effects, and he immediately starts having his prophetic dreams, and that inspires him to go out and try to be more proactive in the world. When I first read it a couple years ago, I was like, oh, well, the synthetic kryptonite obviously affected his mind. And then you get to like the third act of the arc, it's like, no, it was Dominus. I'm like, oh, that's stupid.
Yeah.
That's my whole summary of King of the World.
Hey, really?
Superman did something he shouldn't have done. It can be articulated as he was affected by red kryptonite, but no, he's being mind messed with by Dominus again.
Did they just JoJo that whole story?
Yeah.
Basically. I mean,
it was me, Dio, this entire time.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what's going on. I actually think we should talk about it, because it is a good send-off of good as in quotes. It is a send-off of this era of Superman, because I do actually kind of want to talk about the Jeff Loeb era at some point on this show. It's not as creative as the Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, Mark Millar reboot plans, but it is still an interesting and effective like relaunch of the properties. So yeah, maybe we should like talk about that again soon at some point.
Yeah. It's not as thought-provoking as later stuff, but it's fun.
Yeah, and it's nice to have like Superman robots again.
Very dynamic.
Like, yeah,
absolutely.
But I will say that the Dominus Effect, like this arc that ends with Dominus kind of like rushing off, being like, "You beat me this time, Batman, Superman, Gadget. I'll get you, Gadget." The last 4 issues, like the last issue of each of the books, is super not important. Honestly, if you just read the Superman one, you would understand everything that you need to know, because they do the same thing twice. It's just not that interesting. And he's like a really generic cosmic villain of like, I'm going to realign reality because I'm an Order of Chaos Lord thing guy.
If Dominus had showed up in a single issue of like 70s Marvel, Captain Marvel, or 80s, early 90s Silver Surfer, no one would care. Like, oh, remember that guy that one time? Yep. Well, all right.
Yeah, you would just take him in and
he might show up in Infinity Gauntlet. Yep.
But as it is, it's like, all right, well, that part's not that exciting. But the actual arcs, like the Arrows tour that we do, is fun. Like, I do like getting that, like that Golden Age arc is so good as a whole. And like, I like a lot of the Silver Age, and I like the Bronze Age one. And like the future stuff is also fine. Like, we are kind of dismissive of it, but I find the story of Superman appears in a world that doesn't need Superman a cool idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of these books are individually fine. And as a relaunch that was like really trying to rub like fans' noses in like, hey, you said you wanted classic Superman. Here is all the classic Superman. It does a good job with that.
Right. Wasn't this around the same time that Hyper Time got introduced?
Oh, yeah. It's about the same exact period.
Yeah, it could have just been Kismet, putting Superman back into traditional self. But Superman's mind is all scattered, so Kismet has to send him out through Hyper Time so he can relearn all of the different Hyper Time theoretical alternate timelines of himself so he can be a whole being once again. And then at the end, Yep. Okay, now I'm Superman and I'm back and I'm good to go. The end. No Dominus. I just fixed the Dominus Effect. The effect of the Dominus Effect is you just want to read JLA and not the Superman book.
Yeah, so like I'm really glad to look back on these because again, the Gold and Silver Age stuff was a big way that I like tuned into Golden and Silver Age material in the first place. Like this was a big reason why I like sought out more material and like read up more like old school stuff. So I think that this did its job. It very much was like, hey, Superman had a lot of cool eras. Do you want to check out some of these? And I, as a reader of Superman comics at the time, was like, do I? Yeah. And I think they still work for that purpose. I forget why exactly, but for like a video, I like pulled a bunch of images of like the Silver Age Superman stuff from this for one of my videos. And the art is great and the story is fun. And like the Golden Age stuff is really good. Like it's really good. And unfortunately topical. But it's still, you know, it's good. It's really good. And the Bronze Age stuff it's fun to do like a prankster story and like not have to deal with the fact that like comics had moved on from prankster stories. Like that's all cool. Right. Like, oh, that's fine. And like the future stuff is just more Silver Age, but slightly different. And I wish that it was more than that, but it's still fine. So I find this whole arc really fun to talk about, and I'm glad that we are finally looking at it because going back all the way to the first episode of the show, we were trying to articulate what was the Silver Age Superman. And this was a big part of why I articulated who he was from that lens, because the retro movements of the 90s was a thing that like really influenced me as a young fan. So Grant, thank you for coming on and honestly bringing this. Like we were going back and forth on ideas, and I'm glad that we settled on this. So thank you for coming on. So where can people find you? Tell everyone about Truth, Justice, and Hope. Who are you? Why should people find you?
I am a person who came into Superman fandom very, very late in life, and I have the kind of personality that once I get into something, I get into it all the way. So I've been doing Truth, Justice, and Hope since mid-2021. You can just search for it by searching for Truth, Justice. Make sure you don't just stop with Truth and Justice, because that's a completely different podcast about legal stuff, and that's not me. But like I said at the top of the show, I break down 2 or 3 issues of a Superman comic, beginning with the return of pre-Flashpoint Lois and Clark in Convergence in 2015, and going forward 1 issue at a time, doing most of the Superman titles from the Rebirth era. I just wrapped up the final special that bookended the Rebirth era eponymous Superman book. I am currently starting on Justice League No Justice and Bendis' Man of Steel, and going forward from there. And like I said, also at the beginning of every episode, I have a segment called My Thoughts from the Fortress of Solitude, where I talk about real life through the lens of a Superman fan. And it's just my thoughts on modern day politics and ethics and philosophy, and sometimes just everyday stuff like dealing with my anxiety and how nice it is to get a Father's Day present that is because my family knows my interests, because all they have to do is find me anything Superman related and I'll be happy. But that is my show. I would love it if you guys went and checked it out if you're not already listening.
Yeah, everyone should check it out. It's a fun podcast. I was saying before we started recording, like it helps that like Grant, you and I are like kind of similar minds in terms of the state of the world of things. So it is helpful in that regard. But I feel like a lot of Superman fans are, because like it's hard to be such a fan of like this optimistic world without wanting to make the world a better place and to see injustice be met with something.
Yeah.
I do really enjoy your show. It is a very different niche than ours. And so I think that like that's really cool for Superman fans to have like the different types of podcasts to check out. So by all means, like people should be like subscribing. People should be checking it out. People should be leaving good reviews on your podcast, and then maybe also on ours.
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
5-star reviews are always welcome. Wherever you get your podcast, you can find me. I'm on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Instagram, and you can find all that just by searching for Truth, Justice, and Hope. Most of my shenanigans I do on Twitter just because it's still just the easiest platform. And I have cultivated my timeline to mostly where it's just a stream of positivity and inclusivity and LGBTQ positivity and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, kind
like
of the
that.
same. So it's hard to leave that party while it's still going on. Although today I was like added to someone's list of quote unquote the R word. And I was like,
dang.
Okay, yeah, blue checkmark boy, I'm blocking you.
Yeah. It is a treacherous landscape out there, but we navigate it well.
It's a party where the roof is on fire and we don't need no water. Let the motherfucker burn.
Right. we could put out the fire with the body of this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely has enough liquid income that we could use for that.
I'm a vegan, but I'll still eat the rich.
Well, after we're done eating the rich, Jmike, where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
Well, I'm still like moving my way over to Blue Sky. So I'm on there, but not really on there at the same time.
I was going to say, you need an invite. I've got like 8 of them. Like, I'm good.
Well, Case sent me the invite. So I've been there lurking in the background, like watching, like, how is this one different from Twitter? I like it. It's a lot calmer.
It is.
It's a lot calmer there.
I wish their functionality was a little better, but it's very chill.
Chill Twitter. That's a good description for it.
Yeah. I'm on Blue Sky. I am on Twitter. I also refuse to call it X because that's dumb.
Yep.
But you might, if you message me or like send me a link, I'll respond to it.
Yeah, man. Jmike's replies are legendary. As for me, on all the at sites, you can find me at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on to my damn AIM screen name from high school for dear life, because I was a pretentious classical studies major even then. And so that is Quetzalcoatl 5, because I am both a mythology nerd and a Legion of Superheroes nerd. And you can find the show at certainpov.com, where we have tons of great other shows on our network that are doing wonderful stuff. I'm going to shout out Screen Snark because, you know what? Fuck it. I just saw Rachel today. It was great to give her a big ol' hug and remind her that I cursed her cat canonically. Screen Snark is a great show where we have guests come on for casual conversations with Matt and Rachel. It's a great time. Check out that show. It's so much fun. All the shows at Certain POV are great. I had the wonderful fortune of crashing at Geoff Moonen's house last night and then having brunch with Sam, my co-host from Another Pass, and Rachel from Screen Snark. And it was great. We've got wonderful people doing awesome stuff at certainpov.com. So check out all that stuff that is going on there. You can find a link to our Discord there. You can find ways to direct your comments to us. All that at certainpov.com. Check it out. Check us out on all the socials. It's a great time. And then come back and enjoy our next episode. But until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is scored and edited by Geoff Moonen. And our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
If I leave meeting.
What if you just leave it? You're like, I'm not. Nope. Fuck you. You can't record me.
No.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.